We now present For the Record.
It's why, Wisconsin, I'm announcing that I will not be running for a third term.
Governor Evers announces that he will not seek a third term in office. We check in with who might replace him and what the future means for the Wisconsin Democratic Party, and later insight into the impact of student debt borrowing. Welcome to For the Record. I'm Will Keneally. We'll get to that Evers news in just a moment here, but we start first with the state capitol, where a couple of new bills are circulating. Now, one would ban apps owned by foreign companies from any state devices. Now, this is essentially an extension of the TikTok ban for state-owned devices that Governor Evers signed into executive order 2 years ago. Now, at the same time, another bill circulating in the Capitol right now would allow those who received gender-affirming care while they were under 18 the ability to sue the doctors who provided that health care. Now, both bills could be introduced later this year. Now, Wisconsin Capitol Police are working to identify a shirtless man who attempted to enter Democratic State Representative Priscilla Prado's house Monday night. Now, this comes amid increased scrutiny over lawmaker security after 2 Minnesota lawmakers were shot last month. In a statement, Prado shared that it was a deeply unsettling experience, and she was grateful that no one was injured. At the same time, members of Congress will get additional money for their security, according to a memo put out by Wisconsin Congressman Brian Stile. Now, Stile chairs the Committee on House Administration and outlined in that memo that members of Congress will get more money to spend on their in-home security for equipment, a short-term boost to hire security guards, and expand local law enforcement agreements so that law enforcement can provide additional coverage if there is a threat. Now, a former Wisconsin congressman returned to the Badger State. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy spoke at EAA Air Ventures on Tuesday, unveiling a sweeping update to FAA regulations. Now, the new rule would impact recreational pilots. It would throw out, for example, certain weight limits, allow for more advanced designs, and Duffy says that it will bring the industry to, quote, a new age.
We just finalized a major reform that's going to make recreational flying safer, more accessible, and far less red tape to tie us up in.
Back in Wisconsin, the story dominating the headlines this week, Governor Evers announcing that he will not seek a third term for office. Now, this will leave a wide-open primary for the Democratic nominee for governor, and the first Democrat to jump in the race, Evers' Lieutenant Governor, Sarah Rodriguez. Now, she appears that she may have been ready to jump in the race more than a week ago. That's based on a timestamp for when her campaign uploaded a press release announcing that run to the internet. But her official launch came the day after Evers' decision, and Rodriguez made that announcement through a campaign video.
Getting into politics was never part of my plan, but I saw a broken system and decided to do something about it. So I ran for state assembly and won, representing parts of Milwaukee and Waukesha, where I fought back against abortion restrictions and worked to make life just a little bit easier for Wisconsin families.
Now, we do have a wide list of candidates rumored to be considering a run for governor, but who have not hopped in the ring just yet. Now, among them, Madison State Senator Kelda Roys. We spoke with her in the wake of the governor's announcement.
I'm really grateful to all the people who are reaching out to me and urging me to consider running for governor again. Certainly, it's something I'm thinking about, but I can tell you this. There's no question that I'm going to continue over the next 2 years to do what I have been throughout my time in the Senate. That's traveling around the state of Wisconsin, working to make sure that I'm listening to voters and that I'm doing everything we can to elect Democrats up and down the ticket in 2026 so that we can actually invest in our public schools, expand access to health care, and make life more affordable for people.
So back in 2018, you had some success, but you didn't ultimately emerge from the Democratic primary. What would be different now compared to 2018?
Well, I think it's a completely different world, politically, right? Unfortunately, we had Trump in the White House then. We have Trump in the White House now. But he has really been given complete freedom by the Supreme Court and by having a compliant Republican Congress. And that puts us all in a more perilous situation because he has no guardrails. That means that it's really up to those of us in the states to protect our own citizens, to make sure that the people who live in Wisconsin are able to continue to enjoy the rights and freedoms that they are owed as Americans, and that we're protecting the public services that the federal government is cutting and threatening and withholding funds for.
As we take a look at the Democratic field of possible gubernatorial candidates, one of the other major names is Attorney General Josh Kaul, one of a handful of statewide elected Democrats. Now, we pressed him on Friday about whether he was considering a run.
And
No comments or no announcements today, but what I can say is, first of all, the governor just made this announcement yesterday, and I do think it's important that we take a bit of time to reflect on the significance of the last 6.5 years in Wisconsin. When Governor Evers took office, our state was moving in a very different direction with attacks on workers' rights, attacks on teachers, and that has fundamentally shifted over the past 6.5 years.
Now, we're still expecting more could be considering a run for this open primary. That includes Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley, Secretary of State Sarah Godlewski, Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation Secretary Missy Hughes, and former Democratic State Party Chair Ben Wickler. For more insight into just how this primary might shape up, we're joined by Dane County Congressman Mark Pocan. And I first want to get your reaction to the governor's announcement.
Yeah, I was disappointed, but also happy for the governor. I think he's done a terrific job for Wisconsin, obviously fighting for education funding, being, someone who's put his whole life into that, fighting for what's right in Wisconsin and doing it always as a decent human being. I truly believe there's probably no one I've met in politics who's been a more decent person than Governor Tony Evers. And I wish him well in having some more time to spend with his family, but I got to admit, I'm going to miss him as being our governor.
So I want to invoke your role, as you have done in past primaries, as kind of a referee. What do you anticipate your role will be in this primary here?
Yeah, there's going to be a bunch of primaries, and I'll tell you, my real focus is on, now that we have fair maps, picking up 5 seats in the Assembly, 2 seats in the State Senate, and a congressional seat in Wisconsin towards the 3 we need nationally. If we can do that in Wisconsin, we're going to do more to improve people's lives than anything else that matters. So I really am laser focused on those. I wish everyone well who runs in the various primaries. And after August, I'll probably get involved in backing people, whoever wins, obviously, the nomination. But right now, my focus really, it's so important to have a majority in both houses in the state and in the U.S. House of Representatives that I'm going to put all my efforts towards that.
So when you have a primary like this where a lot of candidates are hopping in, that has certainly the possibility to divide Democratic voters, but also the Democratic donor base as well. I'm curious for your perspective, if we're seeing such a prime time gubernatorial primary like we're going to see in the fall of 2026, do you have a sense of whether that might be a distraction for some of these other key down ballot races like the state Senate, for example?
Honestly, it's why I'm focusing on the state Senate, the state Assembly, and the picking up a seat in the House of Representatives in Wisconsin, because those are all races that will have huge impacts on people's lives. And quite honestly, whoever wins a primary, I'm going to support, because we're going to have to make sure that we have a Democratic governor to work with that, hopefully Democratic majority in the Assembly and Senate, but to put a lot of money and effort into primaries, honestly, doesn't necessarily go towards winning the race. So I want to make sure people understand, and I've been doing this for 3 decades, the focus should be on the state Assembly, the state Senate, and then picking up a House seat in Wisconsin, and we can do the most good.
So I know people have a lot going on, but do you think the Wisconsin voter has kind of the attention span to pay attention to all of these races, all of these candidates at once right now?
I think they follow things after primaries more than anything else, really. So, a lot of more people, the turnout's always smaller in a primary election, right? So there may be certain folks who are going to watch us real intently, but most people are going to enjoy their summer next summer and then be ready to pay attention to an election. But in the meantime, I want to make sure we've got really great candidates running for state legislative offices and congressional seats, because at the end of the day, those seats, picking up those seats and what that means for a voter is going to have a far bigger effect than paying attention to a primary.
Now, I know you're likely not in a position to endorse anybody right now, but I want to get your take on what qualities will embody a successful Democratic candidate for next fall.
Yeah, someone's got to have a solid moral compass that's going to look out for the average person and not the special interest. That's crucial. I think someone who understands in a purple state, you're likely going to have to work with others to get things done. And that's going to be important. And, I obviously am a progressive. I think that, things like getting to universal health care and making sure that we're protecting workers so they have a voice in their workplace and protecting the environment, all those issues are really important as well. So yeah, I wish I could clone Tony Evers so one of them could spend time with his family and one could still be governor. But I think Tony led a good roadmap for anyone who's going to run for governor right now.
Congressman Pocan, thank you. As soon as Governor Evers made his announcement, Sabado's crystal ball, which provides ratings for political races, moved the Wisconsin governor's race from leaning Democratic to a toss-up. Now, for more insight into that rating, we're joined by J. Miles Coleman, an associate editor at Sabado's Crystal Ball, and thanks so much for joining us.
Sure, thank you for having me.
So I want to get a sense of what factored into this ratings change here.
Yeah, it's one of the bigger themes of governor's races next year, not just in Wisconsin, but across the country as well, is there are a lot of open seat races. In 2022, the theme of that cycle was a big number of states had incumbents who were up for re-election. Well, this time, a lot of those incumbents are termed out. Of course, Governor Evers had the option to run for a third term. He decided not to. So that's now an open seat. I think part of it is that, if you look at kind of governor's races across the country, wherever there's partisan turnover, in other words, when a seat flips from Democrat to Republican or vice versa, more often than not, those scenarios happen when there are open seats. So that's part of it. I think incumbency counts for, might not be all that it used to be, but it still counts for something, maybe a few percentage points. And in the context of a race in Wisconsin, a few percentage points might not sound like a lot, but it really is. I mean, because the elections there always tend to be so close, right?
Literally within less than a point often. I do want to ask, too, we get the sense of, Wisconsin, we like to think of ourselves as very politically important, but how closely will this race be watched nationally amid very significant midterms for the Trump presidency?
Yeah, so it is. I mean, if you look at the governor races, where we rank kind of overall, Wisconsin is now only one of 3 toss-ups. The other 2 are Arizona and then next door in Michigan as well. Not coincidentally, even though governor's races tend to be different in some ways, those states are also some of the toss-up states for president and other contests as well. So it is going to be, again, one of the key contests. I mean, it's not just, y'all, you guys up in Wisconsin, it's not just going to be the governor's race next year. Y'all are going to have another one of those lovely, expensive, big state Supreme Court races. So you guys are always on our mind, even over here in Virginia.
Wonderful. Well, J. Miles Coleman, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Sure.
When we come back, we take a look at the latest numbers with a CBS News national pollster, and later insight into the shifting landscape of student borrowing. We'll be right back with more For the Record right after this. Welcome back to For the Record. It's been a busy week in polling numbers. Now, earlier this week, a CBS News national poll took the country's temperature on the Trump administration and the president's job approval. Now, we spoke with the director of that network's polling, Anthony Salvanto, earlier this week. So first I want to get a sense of what we're seeing in terms of the president's job approval over the last couple of months for these voters.
Hey there, Will. Look, big context is the administration, the president started off with slight majority approval. That has slipped over time, but it's the dynamic behind that we've really wanted to look at, because we're increasingly in a situation where the president's political base, if you will, Republicans, MAGA, are still solidly with him on job approval, but the slippages come from others. So if I show you that job rating with a partisan breakdown there, you see strong from Republicans. That's been the case throughout these 6 months, less so now from Democrats and independence. And one of the big reasons for that has been handling of inflation in particular. So I want to show you this because it's pretty important. This is his handling of inflation, and you see that's declined over time as well. It's something people have often said is a top issue. Expectations were high, and that's part of the reason for that dynamic that you see, Will.
One of anecdotally the things that we've seen possibly fracture that kind of MAGA base has been this issue of the Epstein files. But as I understand it, your poll shows that might not be as important an issue for voters here?
Right. It's not fracturing the base in our polling. And what you see is one reason is that even if it's a mix of satisfaction and dissatisfaction about handling this case in particular, other things matter more. And so here's a comparison, for example, does this matter make, an impact in your evaluation of the president? And you see that for all Americans, and then you look at Republicans in particular, a majority say no, not at all. So that's one reason for the dynamic. Now, look, you do see a big majority, almost 9 in 10, of Americans overall saying that they'd like to see the Department of Justice release all its information. For context, anytime almost you ask people, should you get more information? Yeah, they say yes. But that's the dynamic that's going on here. Not really rising to that level of importance. The base, and as I showed you earlier with those partisan breaks on job approval, the Republican base still solidly with the president, Will.
Now, your poll does go into a lot of detail on immigration issues, and I encourage viewers to check it out online. But we see a party breakdown of how people either favor or oppose how Trump is using different detention facilities. The thing that fascinated me was this roughly 2-to-1 independents saying that they oppose the usage. Do we have a sense of how politically salient that group of voters would be?
Yeah, well, take a look at this. Because it's going to illustrate one of the things you just mentioned. And when we're looking at the deportation program in particular, you still get very solid numbers. In fact, over 9 in 10 Republicans who support that program. But the declines in overall approval of this program have come from independents. And that's been where some of the slippage has come from on that. So for context there, let me show you this. The deportation program started off early in his term with majority approval, but that overall number has also declined. And back to something you brought up earlier, the way in which the administration is using these detention facilities, again, you see strong numbers from Republicans on that, but comparably much lower from Democrats and independents. That's part of the dynamic that you're seeing with regard to the deportation program. And I'll very quickly add this. It's often because of who people perceive the administration trying to deport. You look and you see increasing numbers say the administration trying to deport people who are not dangerous criminals more used to think that they were prioritizing dangerous criminals, and that's a big part of why, Will.
Our conversation there with CBS News polling director Anthony Salvanto. When we come back, a glimpse into the changing tide of student borrowing. We'll be right back with more For the Record right after this. Welcome back to For the Record. On August 1st, nearly 8 million student debt borrowers will start to see their interest accrue on their student loans. And this comes amid changes to how the federal government is handling student loans, as the Department of Education has halted debt cancellations for students based on their income. Now, for more on the shifting landscape, we turn to Carol Trone, the executive director for the Wisconsin Coalition on Student Debt. And thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So first, I want to get a sense of this kind of changing landscape. We've seen certainly the cost of education increase. The University of Wisconsin Board of Regents approving earlier this year a tuition increase yet again for students across campuses. How burdensome is the cost of education? How has that shifted over the last couple of years here?
Well, so cost of education, it does continue to go up. It's not, colleges aren't immune to the cost of living increases that we're all seeing. There actually have been some encouraging signs, though, that the tuition part is stabilizing across institutions. I think they are realizing, those pressure points. The challenge, though, is also for students that they have to pay for living costs, and that is definitely contributing to a growing cost overall for people who want to attend college.
So I understand you provide resources as the coalition. What should people know, especially amid this changing landscape here?
Well, it is changing. And so, number one, if you feel like this is confusing and you feel like you're seeing it a lot more in the news, you're not imagining it. It is changing. The best thing that we tell people in terms of resources, so as you mentioned, I lead an organization, the Wisconsin Coalition on Student Debt. We have thankfully received some very generous funding from Ascendium Education Group to be able to do this work. And so what we're doing is we provide a free helpline for callers. Anyone in the state can call and get help trying to understand how to navigate, like, where do I start? What questions should I be thinking about? We have a checklist, so you're like, okay, what am I doing? What am I forgetting? And we also have an email helpline that people can send their questions to us.
Thank you again. Thanks so much for your work, Carol Sherrill. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
When we come back, Wisconsin makes a splash in the stock market. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to For the Record. Now, finally, this morning, a look into the markets. Now, this week, a Wisconsin company, Kohl's, briefly became a meme stock. Now, that's where individual traders inflate the value of a company's stock if they think, for example, large hedge funds are betting against that company's success. Now, Kohl's stock briefly doubled in value over a single-day period before ending the week with a more modest increase. Now, a reminder that you can watch full episodes of the show, as well as expanded interviews on our website at channel3000.com. That does it for us this week. I'm Will Keneally. Have a great rest of your weekend.
This has been For the Record.